As a driven dentist, you see the world differently. Where some see scarcity, you see abundance. When others want to give up, you keep going. You're building an amazing life of significance. That means you can't rely on ordinary advice from ordinary advisors to get to your goals. You want advice that's going to help maximize your net worth so you can take even better care of the people you love, the causes you care about, and make your dent in the universe. But the fact is, this advice remains hidden because relatively few professionals are well versed in them, and the extremely affluent don't care to let you know about them. Join us as we pull back the curtain to reveal the often hidden advice and strategies used by today's most successful individuals and families. Welcome to Dental Wealth Nation. Here's your host, Tim McNeely.
Hey, welcome everyone to another episode of the Dental Wealth Nation Show. And part of building an amazing life of significance is really making sure that you have less stress, because if you've got a lot of stress in your life, that doesn't lead to true thriving. And a lot of times stress can be caused by lack of systems and processes in your office. I know that's certainly something I struggle with. And that's why I'm so excited about today's, because by the time we finish today, you're going to really know how systems can help lead to fewer errors in your practice, and you're going to know how you can implement systems in your practice quicker and with less effort than you ever thought possible. You're going to have insights into a better way to train and monitor things that go on in your practice so that you can really maintain smooth operations in your practice. But most importantly of all, I want you to have hope. I want you to have hope that you really can create a foolproof system and eliminate stress in your dental office. And when it comes to helping dentists eliminate stress through systems and processes, one of the best out there is BJ Moorhead. And I'm so excited to have BJ back with us today. BJ is founder and the CEO of StreamDent, and he's really going to be sharing with us how you can create less stress in your dental office. BJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim. It's great to be back with you.
Oh man, I'm so excited, and what an important topic, and just share a little bit of your background and how you really stumbled on this and the genesis of StreamDent.
It's a story that I can remember. The start of this, I can remember this like it happened last week. It was Monday morning in August 2009. I was working on a 70-year-old man, Joe. I had just met him the week before. He came in really pleasant, but he had put off work, I think, 15 years. Only reason he came in was because he was in pain and because his wife made him come in because she was tired of listening to him. He had 10, 15 teeth that just were bombed out, unrestorable, needed to come out, and we went over sedation consent forms that previous week, got him on an antibiotic, scheduled him for that sedation that Monday morning. The interesting part of the story for what happened is he was pleasant. He followed all the instructions. He had a really easy health history. His vital signs all looked perfect. I was doing IV sedation. I got IV started in the first stick. I told you he was 70 years old. We're taught that for older adults, and it's true, that when you give benzodiazepines like Versed, midazolam, that they have a more profound effect on those older patients. So I knew to go slow with this guy. I gave him not my typical 2 or 2.5 milligram test dose of midazolam. I only gave him 1 milligram. And I gave it a good 2-3 minutes to watch how he was going to react to make sure I wouldn't oversedate him. So I've got him hooked up to all these monitors. We weren't using capnography back then, but I had the pulse oximeter on him, and I'm watching the monitor, and it starts out about 97, 98, and it goes lower. You hear the beep, beep, beep going lower. I've seen this before. So I, by reflex, tipped his head back like you're taught on life support, basic life support, and I reached for the oxygen. I turned the oxygen on as I put a nasal hood on him, and it didn't come on. We wear radios in the office. I, not too nicely, got on the radio and said, somebody didn't turn on the oxygen, get it on quick. And it seemed like an eternity before they came back, as the pulse ox was now going below 90. And they say, doctor, The oxygen tanks are empty. And I felt my ears get hot. I felt flushed. I had failed to train them on how to use the emergency oxygen. So I ran back and got it myself, turned it on, empty. There was not a drop of oxygen in the office. And then I did what no doctor should do during an emergency. I panicked. I could not think straight. All I was thinking about were the oxygen tanks. I had other modes that worked out, thank goodness, but all I could think about was the oxygen tanks. Now, long story short, my dental assistant, I was lashing out at my staff. It was not pretty. I had a lot of growing up to do, okay? My front office assistant took me out in the hall, looked me square in the face and said, "Doctor, you're losing it, is not accomplishing a thing. Get it together." 15 seconds later, I realized I have a reversal agent. I was able to partially reverse him, do the procedure safely. But that day was a wake-up call. I knew that something had to change. What I know now is that someone had inventoried the oxygen the Friday before, and they left it on. And then someone had also left the oxygen on in the operatories. So I started looking at ways we could error-proof this. And I looked at the aviation model. Back 9 years ago, when the plane started getting the least bit complicated with all the switches in the cockpit, and they were crashing planes, aviation realized they had to do something different, and they started using checklists. It's how the miracle on the Hudson happened, where I think 78, 79 people on board, no one got hurt even, because not just of how Sully landed the plane, but every one of the crew knew exactly what to do from the checklists. They have simulations they run, but repeatedly they go through these things and they know what to do and they know what to refer to. That's when I started developing checklists initially for my office.
Wow. Wow. Well, right. Well, so I mean, right. What a stressful day that must have been, right? In such a simple thing that could have been caught.
It could have been life-changing for that patient and life-changing for me both. It could have meant the end of his life, and it could have meant the end of my career.
Yeah.
So yeah, wake-up call, big time.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. And so, right. I mean, systems, they are so important, right? And checklists and making sure things don't go wrong. And one of the jokes I always make is to my wife, because I'm married to a dentist, is I kind of enjoy what I do, because if errors occur in my work, and like any profession, they occur, a lot of mine are easily fixable because it's paperwork, right? I'm not pulling out a wrong tooth, and we're not dealing with life and death situations here.
Yeah.
And so
you have an eraser or a delete key.
Exactly. And so those errors are a little bit easier for me to correct. And so, but in the dental practice, like you mentioned, these are really life and death situations that can be prevented by a simple checklist.
But the deal is, Tim, most dentists don't do IV sedation. Most dentists don't face a life or death potential thing, but we wind up making the same mistakes over and over again. Doctors, think about your past week in your clinic and how many times you had to stop because the dental assistant didn't have all of the supplies, materials, whatever, to finish the procedure, and a run to sterilization to grab it. And multiply that number to figure out how much it's slowing you down and how much it's costing you in productivity.
Yeah. Wow. Well, why do you think a lot of doctors don't get around to creating checklists and systems for their practice? Well, what's going on there? Because I think instinctively we all know how important these things are, and we may have even attempted to do it. But why do you think this is such a struggle for so many practices to really implement well?
There's 2 or 3 facts. Number one, we've always done it that way. In dentistry, unlike medicine, it's considered taboo to look something up. You look bad. In an operating room, if they don't know, if they need to refer to something, they do it. And no one thinks anything of it. That's factor number one. Factor number two.
Wait, go back to that. I don't know that
Okay.
I've heard that before, right? I hear that. I'm like, really? So right. Pilots use checklists before they take off. They're double checking everything, running through, and that's not a bad thing. They've got their manual. So you're telling me in the OR and surgeons will look things up if they need to.
Yes. Now,
Wow.
granted, their patient is sedated, so they can't see that going on. But everyone in the OR all supports each other. That is okay.
Yeah. So right, cross-referencing or double checking, and right, because there's so much
Yeah.
stuff that goes on. So those OR doctors don't have a problem going back and saying, well, what is this? We just want to double check.
Yeah.
But we see a lot of doc or dentists actually kind of afraid to do that. And maybe that is because the patient is in the room with them.
Second, we as dentists have a mindset that everyone thinks like us. Now, to get into dental school, we had to have good enough grades, good enough aptitude to be able to do the thought processes to make the decisions that you do as a doctor. But we hire people that sometimes have college degrees, most of the time don't, and we expect them to be able to think at our level. We need to re-engineer that so that we're giving our dental assistants and our team information at the correct level to where it works efficiently. And then there are offices that have implemented systems, and they've got a binder this thick. And who's going to go into it and look up every time to see what you need to have out for a procedure? I use electronic checklists, cloud-based checklists. That's what StreamDent is. But I don't want to slow down an experienced dental assistant. So I teach them to set up for the procedure, then bring up the list on phone, tablet, PC browser, Mac browser, whatever, and take 20 seconds to look over the list and make sure everything's there. And it makes them look good.
Wow, amazing. And I see we have some guests tuning in right now. If you've got questions for BJ's, we're talking about systems and how to eliminate stress in your dental office. If you have questions, ask them down below. We'd love to know what's on your mind and how we can help serve you today. But so coming back to that, BJ, right? I mean, right. I think that manual on the shelf is such a good analogy, because oftentimes we'll get it. We know it's important. You know, we buy the manual, but then it just sits there. And so how does this system that you've built really make it easier? And I think you've kind of touched on some of those things, but talk to me a little bit about the implementation and how employees actually receive this and how you actually start implementing it into practice.
When I created StreamDent, I created it for my own office 15 years ago. We started with an HTML website, and I then had code built to create a relational database. And the relational part is a key to making this really easy. Let's say I've got hundreds of pre-built checklists that all can be customized in the software on the clinical side and on the business office side. But let's say, for instance, let's go real technical for a second. Stan Melamed teaches that we should use 25 gauge needles. I told you I'm going to get technical. 25 gauge long needles for a mandibular block and 27 gauge for infiltration. Not many dental offices do that. And those that I use mostly are red and yellow color coded. Most offices use yellow and blue needles. So you go in the software and it says, I teach dental assistants quadrant dentistry, and I teach them, if you're doing 2 quadrants, to have out 2 syringes so you don't have to change needles during the procedure. It goes faster. So I want them to have out a syringe with a red needle and a yellow needle. Dr. X doesn't use red and yellow. He uses yellow and blue. So you go in the software, you change the word red to yellow, you change the word yellow to blue. And when you save that, a relational database looks up and finds out, there's 35 other places that reference is. Do you want to change them everywhere else? So as you customize the questions, it builds on itself to where there's very little work. And I have had clients look at it and say, there's hundreds of checklists. We would never get this customized. It's impossible. I'm embarrassed. One time I was teaching a CE course at a dental association. I couldn't make it commercial, so I couldn't mention the software. But I got a critique at the end on the evaluations that said, this is all well and good, but we could never accomplish it. Think, doctor, there's in a GP office probably 10, maybe 15 procedures that are 90 to 95% of your work every day. You customize those checklists, you've got it done. And I also teach teams start where your pain points are. If you've got issues with incoming phone calls and your team not knowing how to handle them, you got new people up there, start there. If the problem is how to be able to check out a patient or handle recall, start there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Well, what an easy way to really start doing this. And I'm a big fan of Dr. Benjamin Harding. He writes a book called Who Not How. And this has been life-changing for me. Is so often I would struggle to try to do things myself. And I would ask the question, how do I get this done? How do I get this done? How do I get this done? But all of a sudden I realized that's the wrong question for me to be asking, right? If I want to excel, I really should be asking, who can do this for me, right? Who has done this? And right, because you want someone else with the expertise who excels at these things. And that way you can just take their expertise and that becomes your new floor and you can build off that. And so I love that you've done a lot of the heavy lifting. I love that it comes out of the experience that you've built. And systems aren't just good for increasing patient care. They can also improve the efficiencies and profitability of an office too, can't they?
Oh, definitely. Very definitely. Yes. Tim, your previous story, the previous quote, it takes me back to when I went to dental boot camp in 96 or 97. There was a retired millionaire by the name of Walter Haley, and then Steve Anderson is still a consultant. They were in Hunt, Texas. But the quote that Uncle Walter said was, it was better to copy genius than create mediocrity.
Oh, well said. Love that. Love that. Oh my gosh. Brilliant. Rewind, listen to that again, and memorize that quote, everyone. That is so well said. So, kind of coming back to just implementing these systems, right? A lot of times practices may feel overwhelmed and busy. And so how do you address the concern for the doctor who says, man, I'm just so busy and I just don't know if I have the time or if my team's going to buy into doing this?
When you work on systems, let's use an analogy to compare this software that I'm talking about, StreamDent, and a practice management system. To be able to start on a practice management system from scratch or even convert from one to the other, you have to have everything in place so that when you go live, there's no glitches. That is intense. It is a big workload. Implementing systems doesn't have to be all or none, do it on day one. You can figure out a strategy on how quickly you want to implement based on your needs. Example, we know that we're going to have to replace Margaret at the front desk and we can't find anyone experienced. So when this person starts in a couple of weeks, we need, they've given their 2-week notice. So we know that they're going to be here the middle of August. So we need systems in place. We've got to work on those systems in the next 2 weeks. And then when Margaret picks up the phone, instead of putting them on hold over and over again, she's got a reference as she's taking the phone call. She's got, as the patient asks the question, she's got an FAQ list. She just looks up and has the reference.
Wow.
I've got something in the software where for special circumstances, like a patient calls and they've got a temporary crown off. That's typically put the patient on hold, walk back, talk to the doctor, come back 4.5, 5 minutes later with the answer because she had to wait for the doctor to be available to know what to do. When those things happen, you put them in the FAQ list or in the special circumstances list. So when it happens the second time, your team has the answers. They don't have to ask again.
Wow. Wow. Oh, so simple and easy. And I love that idea of, right, just kind of start with the pain points in your practice, right? Start with a couple things and don't worry about getting this all done in 1 week, right? You can ease into this.
That's exactly right, Tim.
Yeah. Well, right, and I think you and I have had some conversations about this too. Is right. Oftentimes, doctors, right, they can kind of overcomplicate procedures and setups, and you're really they kind of overcomplicate things. And so talk to me a little bit about how simplifying things can actually help improve efficiencies.
We're analytical. We're analytical thinkers, most of us. And again, the dental assistant doesn't think like the doctor. So it's putting it at the right level.
Hmm.
Let's go back to the local anesthetic issue. When I first wrote a system for that, I wrote down to have out a syringe that has a red 25 gauge uh, needle with lidocaine 1 to 100. It had so much detail in it that you wouldn't bother reading it because it took too
Mm.
much time. We are experts at overcomplicating things. I'll give you another example. Many doctors will have 4 or 5 different materials for bonding agents, for impressions, whatever. If you simplify things to where it doesn't have to be so complicated, find a bonding agent system where one system can work for almost everything, and then your team doesn't have to be confused about the multiple products and how to use them.
Hmm.
If you do have to have the multiple products to where you have one that you occasionally use, then I've got a pop-up box that I've got in my software that tells me for the crown repair, and I want to use this special kind of uh, salinating agent. It tells exactly how to use it because we don't do it that often. Uh, I'm allowed in Kentucky to train my own expanded duties, expanded functions, dental assistants. Many states can still use them, but they have to send them to a course. But nonetheless, when the dental assistant comes out and they need references, why not give them step-by-step instructions to help them learn more quickly?
Hmm. I love that. And actually, I want to talk about that a little bit too. One of the big challenges I hear from the doctors I have the privilege of working with is it's just today hiring people is so hard, finding the right people, keeping the right people, and actually training them to do things well is a major struggle across a lot of practices and a lot of the doctors I talk with. And you certainly have systems that we've talked about that will help the doctor, with the clinical side of it. But what do you have to actually help get new employees and new people up to speed quickly in the practice?
Since the pandemic, this has been the major hot button. And we're finding that many that were in dentistry for a long time have moved on and don't want to return to dentistry. And hiring someone that has experience has been difficult. Now, I am in an area in rural Kentucky. I'm an hour from the nearest city. I don't get experienced employees. It's rare. I wind up having to hire someone that has worked at the area restaurant, that worked in the factory. The typical scenario for getting someone competent that has no experience in dentistry, because let's face it, it is a big learning curve. The typical scenario is that it takes 4 to 6 months for them to be competent. So dentists don't want to go there. Now, using the definition that competency is they can work on them their own or be able to look it up, like a reference like StreamDent, I can be able to have an employee at the competent stage in 4 to 6 weeks. And because I'm in rural Kentucky and had to deal with this problem before the pandemic, I've done it over and over and
Hmm.
over. Did that
Wow.
answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And I think that's so important because, once again, just coming back to that talent acquisition, actually, I just completed with a strategic coach in partnership with one of the largest studies of entrepreneurs ever done. And we dove into the top business risks and concerns for entrepreneurs. And still today, 17% are really concerned about talent acquisition and bringing people on. And there's a lot, right? And a lot of times, right, the competition for talent in your dental practice, it's not the dental practice down the street. It's the other companies that are hiring and that can onboard people really, really quickly. I've talked to some people that work for some of these major, e-commerce firms, and you can show up and 2 days later, you're able to drive their trucks and do deliveries because their training on onboarding is so honed in that they're able to get you up to speed quickly. And, I think that's a huge differentiator too, because now you don't necessarily have to be looking for someone who has experience in dental. You can just bring in a qualified person and train them quickly.
And our potential employees know that it can be easier down the street. They don't want to walk into something that's complicated and discouraging.
Wow. Oh, that's so powerful, right? And it's solving a huge problem because now you're actually opening up a larger employee pool than just other people who have been in dental.
Yeah, for sure.
So, wow. So no, so powerful. And so we've talked about, just reducing stress in the business office through having systems, through having processes, through having checklists. And so talk to me a little bit about what the future vision for Extreme Dent looks like, and really how you see this evolving, and just dental practice management continuing to get better and better with these systems.
My goal is to change the paradigm that we have in dentistry, because we've always had to depend on what was up here, and it was never okay to look something up. My goal is that it becomes the standard of care for offices to use standard operating procedures to go throughout their day. It was a big revolution in medicine about 15, 20 years ago. A surgeon, U.S. born, named Atul Gawande, he was born in the Northeast U.S., I think. He was head of the World Health Organization. And you can read his work in a book called The Checklist Manifesto. You would think it is technical. It is stories about how he went about implementing things and how it changed things in medicine. I, back in May, had a kidney stone, second in my life, first time in 18 years. I hope it doesn't happen for another 18 to 20 years. But when they took me to the operating room, they asked before they put me under, which side is the kidney stone on? Now, that they had that information. The point was that was part of their timeout before they started a procedure to make sure there weren't any mistakes. Before the checklist manifesto concept happened, when you went into a hospital and you were admitted, you had to have the bracelet on the arm. Now, if you go in for a blood test, bracelet on the arm, before they draw your blood, they look at the label on your arm. They ask you your name and your date of birth. They check the date of the stickers that they're putting on the vials to make sure everything matches up. Those are timeouts that have dramatically decreased the mistakes in medicine. But we in dentistry are too proud to do that. Yeah. My goal is to change how we think in dentistry.
Oh, I love that. Well, and I kind of faced those things early on in my career, right? I deal with numbers all day long. And so often I thought I had to have everything memorized, and the different tax brackets and giving exemptions and estate plan exemptions. And I finally just gave up trying to know all that stuff because they changed the numbers on me every single year. And so, right, it'd be like doing dentistry and you're like, well, how many teeth are in the mouth today? We have no idea. And so, when you're dealing with the tax code, so I finally just gave up and got comfortable saying, you know what, let me just double check and find out what those numbers are now, because they're always changing. And so I love that idea of, right, just kind of laying down our pride and being willing to say, hey, let's double check and make sure we do everything correctly, because that's going to lead to a better patient experience. It's going to lead to better outcomes, and certainly, hopefully, a whole lot less stress in the office too. Let me talk to you a little bit about, like, kind of measuring success, and are there some KPIs or things that you look at when you're implementing these checklists? How do you track that these are actually being done?
If a doctor is sitting in the operatory and he has to keep asking for something that they have to run to sterilization, and then suddenly that disappears, it's going to be very pleasantly obvious that they are using the systems. Flip side, if they don't, and they're having to run and get things, they're making the same mistakes over and over again. You hear the verbal skills as you walk by reception, and they're answering the question, or they're talking to the patient and using verbal skills you have asked them to use or you have asked them not to use. It is very obvious if they're being used. And I like to teach doctors to use the carrot approach, not the stick approach. Reward them for doing something right. There's a good book that Alison LaCourcier told me about that I'm reading now called Whale Done, where it's how they teach the Shamu whales at SeaWorld, and it's positive reinforcement.
Wow. So, how can we get in touch with you and find out more?
If you want to check out StreamDent, it's www.streamdent.com, StreamDent. My email address is dr.m, Dr. Moorhead, dr.m@streamdent.com. And I use a Google Voice number that rings both my office and my cell phone, so it's easy to find me on either coast, 502-509-1570.
Excellent. I put the link to StreamDent right below. So I would encourage you to check that out, because I know I certainly want less stress in my life. If you're listening to this, if you're working on building that amazing life of significance, chances are you want to help eliminate stress in your life. And so, BJ, before we sign off here, any closing thoughts for us or additional words of wisdom?
That one I wasn't expecting. No final thoughts. I just hope, doctors, that you'll challenge your way of thinking. Don't just dismiss this. It really can be life-changing.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you. Thank you for sharing so generously with us and really helping us focus on some simple things that we can do, right? That's what I love about our conversation today is, right, we're all so busy. This is a system that you can just pick up, you can implement and start running with right away. And like you said, you're going to notice those wins really quickly in your practice. And so that's what we're looking for in life, is some quick and easy things that we can implement so that we can start getting even better in our practices. So thank you once again for sharing so generously with us, BJ.
Thank you, Tim, so much.
All right. We'll see you all again here soon on the Dental Wealth Nation show.
You've been listening to Dental Wealth Nation. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. Join us next time as we pull back the curtain to reveal the often hidden advice and strategies used by today's most successful individuals and families, and help maximize your net worth so you can take even better care of the people you love. Till next time, make sure to hit the website at dentalwealthnation.com.